Hello everyone, hello, and welcome back to the show. I hope we're all doing well. I hope we're enjoying the last few weeks of our summer, and I hope we're all ready to go for the new academic year once it rolls around on the 13th of September. And today I'm delighted to bring to you this episode where myself and our lovely secretary Hayley McAdam, we discuss 12 things that we believe are very important for incoming law students to know. We just think, in alignment with our summer school, which, if you don't know, is running right now. This is actually the second week we're on to now, and it's really geared towards helping the first year law students, whether they be BA or LLB students, hit the ground running on their course. And we thought, let's do a podcast centered around 12 things that we believe are really important to know if you're coming to study at Stirling. And there's actually some things in here which, probably all of them actually, are really, really helpful, and we actually believe as a committee would have helped us a lot if we'd known them prior to studying our first year on the LLB. So I hope you enjoy, I hope you find it beneficial, and as always, if you aren't following us, subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it may be. However you're listening to this show, please do consider dropping a follow, because it really does help us out. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. Like I say, we think it's very beneficial, and we hope that you feel the same way.
Welcome to the Stirling University Law Society podcast, proudly sponsored by Ashurst Advance, creating client value through advanced thinking. Now, over to your host and Vice President, Jedd France.
Hayley, welcome back to the show. You're actually the first guest to come on to Series 2, so big congratulations. I hope it's a big honour for yourself. But first of all, before we jump into the episode, I want to know how your summer's been so far.
Oh, hi, Jedd. I'm so glad to be back on the podcast, and I suppose it is a bonus to be on be the first guest on Series 2. My summer's been really good, actually. I definitely benefited from the warm weather, just chilling out, especially after a stressful and different academic year to what any of us are used to. So it was good just to chill out, but I'm definitely ready to get back into the books now.
Yeah, I suppose it's been good because, like you say, the weather has been absolutely sensational. It's been a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I know when we get the weather, it's really, really nice and sunny. You think, okay, it's bound to end tomorrow or the next day, and it just kept rolling on and rolling on and rolling on, and you're thinking, wow, like it's so weird for Scotland. But I definitely agree with you. I definitely think it's time to get back into the books, and I suppose that's a good thing about the summer school. It's kind of getting us back into that routine of society stuff and university life, and trying to be as productive as possible for when semester runs around. So yeah, as I've mentioned in the intro, we're obviously here it's a bit of an episode for the incoming freshers. It's a 12 things an incoming law student should know, and we were thinking this is probably a good thing to do because obviously we're doing the summer school right now, and we've went through the points that we've got, and we think, if we had this in our first year of studying law, whether it be the BA or the LLB, there's 12 really, really useful points, and it can make a big difference if you take them on board and you learn them as soon as possible. So the first one that we've got is rather simple. I don't think we need a big discussion about it. Basically, it's one of those things that seems really obvious once you know it, but you'd actually be surprised how many people start studying the BA without realising it. So basically, if you want to be a solicitor, you have to do the LLB. You can't do a BA in law and then go on to do the diploma and your traineeship and become a solicitor. It's not the route you can take. You have to do the LLB in law. And like I said, that might sound really obvious when you know it, but there are definitely people who come to university, whether it be Stirling or other ones around the country, and do the BA and then realise, oh crap, I need to actually go and do the LLB, and they have to transfer. So it's quite a sad story when you hear that, but I just think it's something to make people aware of, just in the off chance that someone's listening who's coming to study in September and they're doing the BA and they didn't realise you have to do an LLB to be a solicitor, if that's what they're looking to do. And hopefully there'll still be time for you to change before you actually commence on the BA. So yeah, that's the first one. But number two is also super important, and I'll kick it over to Hayley in a second to discuss it. But when you come to do the LLB particularly, you're going to be getting into the routine of doing seminar answers to questions which will be handed out by our lecturer. And when it comes to problem questions, there is a set structure that you should use when answering these questions. So Hayley, over to you. Would you like to explain what that structure is for us?
Yes. So the structure is called the IPAC structure. So it's IPAC and it stands for Introduction, Principle, Application and Conclusion. And this is a technique, as Jedd said, that you will become familiar with very, very early on in your studies. And it is absolutely crucial for writing good seminar questions and then writing good assignments when the time comes for that. And trust me, it'll come along quite soon. So basically, you always follow this structure when you're writing your answers. At first, I think it does become quite difficult to make sure you're always following the same pattern, but once you get used to it, you do get into a routine to make sure you're always hitting the correct points.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's quite hard to get your head around at first. And I think if you're coming into your first year in September, actually dedicating some real time to learn the IPAC structure will help you in the long run. So we'll just batter through that again. Introduction, principle, application and conclusion. Obviously, we're not lecturers, we're not seminar tutors, we're not going to tell you exactly how to do that structure, but your tutors are there to help you. And I remember in my first contract seminar in first year, we had problem questions where we had to use this structure. So it's not something that you can avoid using for the first few weeks. It's literally like right at the start you need to learn it. So it's very important. It might seem a bit daunting at the start because you maybe never used it before or never heard of it before, but once you get into the rhythm of doing it, it becomes second nature. And whenever you see a problem question, you already start thinking subconsciously, how do I structure that in the IPAC structure? And don't be afraid to get stuck in, use it, and then once you turn up to your seminars, you may have done it wrong or made little mistakes. I know that's what I was like. Literally in my first contract seminar, I turned up thinking, oh, I know this answer, I've absolutely smashed this. And then our tutor at the time was Sarah Carrick. Absolutely loved Sarah, and she was like, yeah, that's completely wrong. And I was like, oh, awesome. Like, that's just the way it goes. And just do not be afraid to get stuck in, try it, and then make mistakes, because ultimately that is the way that you're going to learn. So it is very important, but the sooner you get into the rhythm of doing it, the more beneficial it's going to be for you in the long run. So that was number 2. On to number 3 is it sounds like a bit of a burden, and it's not something that a lot of us like to accept, but I think it is important just to accept the fact that you're going to be doing a lot of reading on a law course, and it is important to help you develop your knowledge. Obviously, you're going to get given out, it depends on the module, but I mean, what about you, Hayley? You've just completed your first year. How did you think your reading list was in first year?
It was quite extensive, but I think as long as you're on top of it, you can manage it quite well. Basically, what happens is every week you get a different seminar question, and your lecturer usually writes down the chapters of which book you should read which relates to that topic. And I think as long as you keep on top of that and you continue to do it weekly, then when the time comes when you do want to study or you need to research for your assignment, you don't have 100 pages to read all at once, because that can be quite daunting and also time consuming. So I think as long as you build up the knowledge as you go along, and you can do that obviously by keeping up with your reading, then you'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, and like we say, obviously we're not all going to enjoy reading extensive legal textbooks, because sometimes it can be like 30-40 pages for 1 week just for one module, which is quite a lot. But if you think about it in the long run, a lot of the time your seminars week on week build you up to that essay that you'll have to do for that module. And then if you've done your reading, you've done good notes, you've done good seminar answers for your seminars every week, you can really look back at those answers and those notes and that reading and just pick out exactly what you have to write for your essay, rather than if you've skipped doing all that stuff, by the time the essay comes round, you've got a lot more work to do. And obviously we have reading week, which is there for you to do those essays. You'll still find yourself slipping behind and using up far too much time reading and trying to go over seminar stuff if you haven't put in that work week on week. So I think that's kind of a tip on its own, Hayley, when it comes to just going through week on week. If you just be consistent and do the work that's given to you, it's really going to help you in the long run, especially when it comes to essays and when it comes to exams as well. Like we've said, it's not fun. I don't particularly enjoy sitting down to a D-like textbook and having to read 40 pages of it. It's not nice, but at the end of that is growth, and is the knowledge that you need. And I think if you just focus on that end goal, then it makes it a lot easier to actually do the action of reading the book. So number 4, which is a really important one. I don't think we need to speak about it too much, Hayley. I think I'll just bash out myself, but definitely be careful with case jurisdictions. So if you've absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, when it comes to, everyone knows, you go to court, that is then what's referred to as common law. So that'll be a case, you'll have one party against another party. What we mean by jurisdiction is where that case took place. So if that case takes place in an English court, that means that falls under the jurisdiction of English law. So if you're using that case in a Scots law answer, then that is not definitely going to be the case. It's not going to be definite law that should be followed up here in Scotland. What is known as persuasive here in Scotland. So you can use it, but it's only persuasive. You can't sit there with an English case and say, oh, this, if you're doing a seminar answer and you have a similar question or a similar scenario which follows the same sort of facts as an English case, you cannot sit there and say, oh, it's definitely gonna be this outcome because this case said so. It's only persuasive. So if you get the chance, definitely try and use Scottish cases which follow Scots law, which might sound obvious again, but it's just definitely something to look out for. Obviously, we're not going to sit here and teach you extensively how to find out if it's English law or Scots law. You'll find that out on the course itself, but definitely just be wary of it, because there's been times where I've been looking to use a case for something and then it's not been until a few hours later where I've realised, oh no, that's English law, and it's just something that you really should bear in mind. So for number 5 is a really useful tool, and I'll let Hayley explain it in a couple of seconds. So use Westlaw as much as possible and only use reliable sources. So what I was wondering, Hayley, obviously you did the first year of the BA. Did you have to use Westlaw on the BA, or was it only when you switched to the LLB that you had to use Westlaw?
The resource was there for us when I studied the BA, but to be honest, I didn't really dig into it that much. I think I went on and had a wee look just for a nosy, but I didn't actually rely on it and use it as sources when I done the BA. However, when I switched to the LLB, then it was like my best pal.
Yeah.
To be honest, so there was quite a difference there. In terms of reliable sources, I would always stick to Westlaw and definitely don't use things like Wikipedia or unreliable newspapers. I think as well, if you have quite an extensive source list of academic books or academic journals, then it's quite impressive to the lecturers as well that you've actually gone out and done that research on your own. You've not just relied on the Case Digest off of Westlaw. I think it shows real initiative.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And again, don't want to get too into different types of sources, but you'll have primary and secondary sources. Primary sources is like statutes, legislation, case law, things like that. Secondary sources are like textbooks and journals and things like that. So obviously you want to be using the most reliable sources of law. So if you're saying that the law, or like if you're trying to describe a legal principle, obviously the best bet is to use the statute that it comes from or a common law decision that it comes from. But ultimately what we're saying is, like Hayley says, don't go away and take a case summary from Wikipedia. It's definitely not something that's gonna it's not gonna go well for you if you ever try and reference that in a law essay, and you know the lecturers won't be afraid to be a little bit savage with it. So it's definitely just something to watch out for, and Westlaw really is your best friend, like Hayley mentioned. It's quite daunting at the start when you look at it and you don't really know how to navigate it. There's loads of different parts of it. You can look at legislation, you look at cases, journals, loads of different places you can kind of go into a little rabbit hole on Westlaw. But once you get the basics down, it will be your best friend. And I'm pretty sure the university actually do a little tutorial on how to use Westlaw. I remember doing that in my first year, and that really helps a lot. So definitely attend that if you get the chance. So for number 6, we're at the halfway mark now. Don't automatically assume that you need to buy all the new up-to-date books. I really hope there's not someone from the law school listening, because they're probably ready to punch their phone or whatever they're listening on right now. Because they will try and tell you, make sure you go to our pop-up bookshop, make sure you buy all the up-to-date textbooks. But that's expensive. I think for me in first year it was like £120 just for one semester for like dialect and contract and public law, and it's not cheap, and it's not something that you really need. What about you, Hayley? Because I know that you did the BA in your first year. I'm not too sure what kind of books and stuff you would have had to buy for that. And obviously you did your first year of the LLB online. So did you still go out and buy the books, or were you smarter and looked at them online?
Well, I'll start with the BA first. I did buy all the books because, like you, Jed, we're not into first year university. There's almost like a sense of panic that
Yeah.
you need to have these books. But if I'm being honest with you, I mean, I think I just looked at them for the sake of it because I had them. I didn't really rely on them or reference them that much. And when I started the LLB, I quite like having books. Actually, I'm quite a neat freak that way, so I quite like the aesthetic of them. But if I'm being honest, I used online quite a lot because it was just easier if you were typing something up in a Word document just to switch between pages, and it did make it easier because you could highlight it better and things. And I think as well, over the COVID period, because the library was shut, a lot more books were made accessible online. So it definitely does help people, and as you say, they cost a fortune.
Yeah, especially if you're a student and you're getting SAS and stuff. The last thing you want to do is blow £120 on in one day on 3 or 4 different textbooks. It's not fun. And obviously, like Hayley mentioned, I mean, for my second year, obviously it was all online, and I remember buying a couple books as a physical copy, but that was only for my own preference. They were literally all made available online, and as we move towards the new semester and it's going to be blended learning, and at this moment in time we're not 100% sure what that means. I cannot confirm whether the core textbooks will be online again or not, so it's definitely something to look out for. But what I would say, and I mentioned this in the kind of promo video that myself and Claire and Aidan made up at the campus, maybe just leave it a couple of weeks in your first semester as a first year to see really how much you need that physical copy, not just for the physical copy itself, but then you might be able to understand whether you want a brand new copy of it or whether you want to buy a second-hand one from one of the older people in the LLB or the BA, or online from eBay or Amazon or whatever it may be. Because obviously, I mean, I'm a bit like Hayley. I don't really want to buy a book that's been like highlighted in and scribbled out, and it feels like a cheat sheet sometimes because like half the answers will be there and it'll be like little case notes and stuff.
Yeah.
But I definitely like to have a clean textbook, but that's just my own personal preference. So maybe just leave a little while to figure out how you want to work, and then you can decide how much money you want to invest in textbooks, because like we said, it's a lot of money and it's not something that you should just make a split second decision on, because that's what I did. And then I looked at my bank statement and I seen £120 and I was like, why? Literally at the end of first year I was like, why? So if any first years want some books, hit me up. I've got plenty of them in good condition as well. So yeah, on to number 7. This is a really important one, and I'm just going to kick it straight over to Hayley. And Hayley, you've got complete freedom to plug your Oscola and essay writing class, which is taking place this Thursday. That's all about referencing, so would you like to explain what we mean by referencing?
So basically, when you're writing like an academic essay or assignment or even an answer, it's always good to get into the habit of referencing your sources. And that kind of relates back to point 5 that Jedd was discussing in terms of Westlaw, and it's also quite useful to use the legislation websites as well. And also, I think what can be quite confusing when you're discussing referencing is if you look and you maybe find this journal that's not that reliable, so you won't use it as a source, but you look at that opinion, you then can't just write that opinion without referencing it. The same way I would say about Wikipedia, sometimes you'd see a fact or just the way someone had wrote something, you think, oh, that looks quite nice, that sounds quite smart, but you can't just write that without referencing. So basically, as Jedd was saying, we have our summer school running over these 2 weeks, and next Thursday, the 26th, I'm running a workshop with Shirley Miller, and she's an academic librarian here at the University of Stirling, and she is fantastic. Her knowledge is second to none, basically, in terms of referencing, especially with the Oscola referencing system that law students use. So that would be really useful for anyone to come. I think, to be honest, it'll help a lot of people who aren't just in first year as well. I'm going into second year and Jed's going into third year, and I think it'll still help us as well, because you can never stop learning how to use Oscola.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a really confusing system. And I mentioned in the first episode of the podcast, when I mentioned the Oscola class, Oscola is something that I think is very hard to be 100% at and be an expert on. I think what we do as law students is we follow the rules as much as we can, fall into our own habits, see what we can get by with, and just go with it and hope for the best. I know for myself personally, that's what I do, and I seem to get by okay with it. But like Hayley mentioned, I'm still going to be there because I want to know, am I doing things right? Because ultimately we all want to get better, and there's always ways to get better with a scholar. Like I say, it's very, very hard to be an expert. There's always going to be little tips and little tips and tricks that you can use, and it's because it's so detailed as well, and the way you format things, like it's not just a case of, okay, just name that case there, that's enough. It's all about, what do you put in italics? How do you reference the cases and stuff? And it's all very quite complex. So definitely for anyone really, whether you're in first year or fourth year, it's definitely helpful to come along, and I think it will be probably one of the most beneficial classes on our whole summer school program. So definitely get along, and if you're looking for tickets, just head over to our website, or you can head over to our social media and you'll see the full list of all of our workshops there as well. So yeah, definitely reference everything which is not your own words. So with legal essays, there's like a little bit that you can kind of put your own opinion into, but if you're forming an argument, obviously it has to be based on something. It can't just be based on your own opinion out of nowhere. So if it's literally not your own words or your own opinion, then you're looking to reference it, because plagiarism is a massive deal at university, and the last thing you want to do is get pulled up for stealing someone else's work, which is literally what it is. If you write someone's work without crediting them, then that is literally stealing, and you can get in big trouble for it. So just always keep a note of things that you're using. If you go on a website, and even if you're not looking at using it, just keep a note of it anyway, because you never know what you're going to subconsciously use, and it's always helpful to just have that list there, so when you go and do your referencing, that you can just reference everything that's there and make sure that you're just being too safe. It's better to be too safe than play it too risky. That's definitely the way I would advise you to go when it comes to referencing. So yeah, on to number 8. This is something which it can be quite daunting at the start. I thought we said daunting a lot. I think just being a law student in general is quite daunting, but definitely build up your confidence to network with people as soon as you can. It's, you know, networking is that scary word that everyone's like, I don't really want to do that, because it's going out of your comfort zone and speaking to people who you don't know, particularly in the legal industry, when people are so, I don't know what the word is, but they come across so professional, and because it's like law and you're speaking to solicitors, it's like, oh, you know, you feel a bit out of your depth speaking to them just as like a little first year law student. I definitely know that's how I felt personally anyway. So definitely just try and get over that hurdle as soon as you can. I wouldn't say networking is like a critically essential thing in first year, but if you're interested in it, it will definitely benefit you moving forward if you kind of break that barrier as soon as possible, because the legal industry, it is big, but the more you network, you actually find out it can be very small. It's a very small world, and everyone does seem to know everyone. I know myself and Claire were organising an event around legal tech, and we were speaking to a gentleman who works at Codebase in Stirling, who specialise in legal tech, and they advise law firms on how to use technology to benefit them and their clients. Now, he's not even a lawyer, you know, he works in tech, and we were speaking about lawyers to him, and he was like, oh yeah, I spoke to that person last week. Oh yeah, I know that person. I was in a class with them like 2 months ago. And that's not me lying, that literally happened, and it is quite scary because everyone seems to know everyone. So the more contacts you can build up, then honestly, you'll be surprised at how much of a positive impact that can have for you. And what about you, Hayley? Because you've been obviously very active on our academic events, and you'll have spoke to different professionals. So how has networking helped you?
I would definitely say that it has helped me, and I think being part of the Law Society and coming to our academic events is probably one of, if not the best ways to do it, because you just go and, for example, when we have our events with Ashurst or Brody's or different law firms and different legal professionals, after you can just follow them on LinkedIn, and everyone's more than happy and really friendly to follow you back, and then you just get news of what they're doing. And I think once you get into the habit of it, it just kind of takes care of itself. And I think it is just really good to know loads of people in different areas. And I think what you're right in what you're saying, Jedd, is that it can seem quite scary, and you think, oh, they're a big scary lawyer, but they're actually not. They're just people like you and I, and they're more than happy to help you.
Yeah, they're definitely very helpful. That's something that I found, particularly in the last year through lockdown, when I really put an emphasis on LinkedIn and getting to know different people from a wide variety of different areas in the legal industry. You'll be so surprised at how helpful people are. If you drop them a message and ask a question or ask for a bit of advice, or when we email people and ask them to speak at events, 9 times out of 10 they say yes, or they only say no because they've got conflicting plans. But then even then they'll say, I can't come, but I know this person might be interested, or I can see if someone from my team can speak. And it's not something you would think of in the legal industry, but everyone is just so helpful, because I feel like we get told as law students that, oh, the legal industry is so competitive, traineeships are so competitive, places on the diploma are so competitive. But I think because of that competitive nature, people who are in the industry want to help you as much as possible. They don't see you as a threat. They know what it's like to be struggling in some regards, so they want to help you as much as they can. And that's what we say, just try and get over that barrier as soon as possible, and you really will be surprised at how helpful people in the industry can be. So yeah, number 9 is a really important one, and it goes back to your seminar answers and essays, and that is, please don't over explain case facts. It's something that it took me until second year to realise that it was causing a lot of problems for me in my essays and my grades and stuff, because case facts, obviously they're useful for context and showing why a particular case is relevant in a given scenario. But the main point of you using that case is to show what legal principle came out of the decision. What is the law that came from that decision? You're not there to say, okay, this person did this, they ended up in this place, this happened, this was really unfortunate, and then this ended up happening, so they went to court for this, and this is what happened in the court case, and blah, blah, blah. Before you know it, you've used 100 words talking about a case, and it's just eating up at your word count for no reason. And lecturers will mark you down heavily for it, and they can see through it straight away. And trust me, I found that out the hard way. So definitely do not over-explain case facts. It's a bit of a... It's quite like a bit of an instinct, you know, I mentioned this case, so I probably should provide a bit of background facts. But the more you just kind of be stubborn with yourself and say, no, I'm not going to mention the facts, I'm going to literally have one sentence explaining what briefly happened and then go on to discuss the legal principle that came out of that decision, you will see a drastic upshoot in your grades, and it's definitely something to focus on. So yeah, don't over explain case facts, please. If there's one thing I want you to do, just don't over explain case facts. Trust me, I've learned that the hard way. And yeah, number 10, lectures may be recorded, but it's still useful to attend in person. Now I feel like I'm being a spokesperson for the uni by saying that, but I think it all comes back to the fact that obviously me and you, Hayley, we've had over a year, it's like a year and a half of like online learning. We don't want to don't want to go back to behind the computer screen. We're looking forward to getting back onto campus. So ultimately it's kind of asking yourself, like, what are you here for? Are you here to do a full course behind a computer screen and not go onto campus and hear from the lecturers in person and stuff like that? So what about you, Hayley? Are you looking forward to getting back into a lecture theatre? Because I feel like at the time, sometimes like, oh, I can't be bothered. But now that we've not had it for like a year and a half, I'm buzzing to go back. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think before COVID and all of that happened, it was a bit of a drag sometimes to actually go into the uni, but now we've had that, I mean, I would almost say privilege taken away from us, then I can't wait to actually get back in, because I didn't realise how much I would have missed it until I didn't have it. I think as well, just the social contact, and I think people underestimate how much they learn from their peers as well. You just bounce off of each other, and someone might ask a question that you hadn't thought about, or bring up a topic that you hadn't thought about, but then you actually learn from that, and it puts together the bigger picture. So I'm really looking forward to going back into university. And as you say, you don't go to university just to sit behind a laptop screen and read books.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously the lectures are recorded, so it is helpful to go back and watch them, but I definitely wouldn't recommend actually watching all the lectures for the first time after the fact, because I feel like I get a lot of motivation from being in the theatre, watching it take place, and then I'm taking notes. I just feel more motivated to learn. Whereas if I'm back home, like in the comfort of my own flat, behind my own computer, and I'm going back to watch it, you end up just getting distracted, and it's quite a dangerous game to play. So, and like Hayley mentions, the social aspect is big as well. Obviously, you're not gonna meet many people and make many friends if you're not actually on campus and in lecture theatres. And I suppose what Hayley mentioned about asking questions leads us on nicely to the penultimate point that we have here, and that is, don't be afraid to ask them. Don't be afraid to ask questions, whether it be to lecturers, seminar tutors, other students, or even people within the Law Society. I mean, I know I can speak for the whole committee when I say we're more than happy to answer any questions. We've all been in your shoes of being a first year law student, and we know how scary it can be and how confusing everything can be, and you're trying to digest 100 different things, and it can be overwhelming. So just don't be afraid to ask questions. I suppose it kind of goes back to networking. It's quite a daunting. That's the key word. I should just call this episode daunting. That's the key word of the full episode. But yeah, it can be quite daunting at first, but again, it's just trying to get over that barrier of looking silly, because ultimately you don't look silly, and anyone who does think you look silly, just don't pay attention to them, because ultimately you're there to learn. That is the first and foremost reason that you're there to better yourself and get an education and ultimately work towards a career that you want in a field that you're interested in. And you're only going to get that essential knowledge that you need if you ask questions, if you ask people to clarify things, or if you're unsure about anything, ask questions. Honestly, in my first year, I tried to get over that hurdle as fast as I could, and I was successful in doing that. And it gets to the point where you feel like you're annoying people because all you do is ask questions. I mean, I'm quite famous at our events for always asking questions of people, just because I'm quite intrigued that way. I wouldn't say it's nosy, but I'm just quite, interested in what people have to say, and I'd rather ask the question and find out so I have clarity in my own head, as opposed to going away feeling confused and potentially believing something that isn't true. I don't know about you, Hayley. What do you think about that?
I would probably say that the questions that incoming first years have now or will have is probably a mirror image to the questions we had when we were in first year.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a pattern that will constantly follow. So definitely do not be afraid to ask questions. And just going back to the points about lecturers being impressed, they'll probably be thankful that you're asking the question, because it shows you are engaged and you do want to learn more. And no question is ever too silly, as Jedd said.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, from personal experience, a lot of the faculty and your lecturers and seminar tutors, they love when people ask questions, because it shows that you're invested, it shows that you're interested, and then they'll have a little soft spot for you, which can go a long way. It's always nice to feel like you've got good connections at the law school. And if you're asking questions and if you're engaged and you're showing you're paying attention, but you just want a bit more information about something, or you ask them to clarify a particular issue, because after all, the law can be very grey, and it's very precise in some regards, and it can be very confusing and detailed. So trust me, I've asked loads of questions, and you've just got to get over that hurdle of feeling a little bit silly. And the sooner you can do that, honestly, the better, and it really will stand you in good stead moving forward. So we're on to the last one, which I think is quite a good one to end on, and I suppose it's not exclusive to being a law student. Literally any student that goes to the University of Stirling, please just be aware that parking is a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. So obviously there's so many people coming in. You've got students, you've got academic staff, you've got other support staff, you've got the catering staff that work in the cafes and stuff. There's so many different people on campus, and please do not fall into the trap of turning up. If you've got a lecture at 9 a.m, don't turn up at 8:45 and expect it. I'm just going to park right here outside the main entrance, and that's you'll be 10 minutes early. That's not the way it's going to go. And everyone on committee, I'm sure, has horror stories. I know I certainly do. I've had to literally abandon my car on grass to try and get to a seminar. Like it gets quite intense, and then it ruins the rest of your day. So what I would say is, if you can try and get on campus as early as possible. Obviously, if you don't have a class until 1, I'm not saying turn up at 8. Obviously, it's good if you do that, but just be aware that you might have to drive around for 20 minutes and try and find a space, and you need to try and be like, I don't know what the word is, but if you see someone that looks like they could be leaving, definitely just wait and try and see if they are leaving, because parking it is a nightmare. And I know, Hayley, you lived on campus, so have you got any horror stories of parking, or were you the one of the lucky ones that could just roll out of bed and go to your lecture at like 8:55?
Well, I could do that sometimes, but if I had my car parked on campus, so because obviously I stayed there and then I nipped to Tesco or whatever, I would come back and my space would be gone.
Oh yeah.
And I'd be quite annoyed at that. But that's just an example of I was living on campus, but I wasn't guaranteed a parking space all the time because the car parks are just so hectic. And if you're not familiar with the university campus, there's not a lot of car parks like roundabout on the outskirts of the campus. So it really is interesting. You just need to keep calm and just breathe.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things, because I remember when I was in first year, and everything's new, everyone's making friends, everyone's want to go out and explore, so you maybe have like an hour or two between classes, and let's go to McDonald's, let's go to Nando's, and you're thinking, no chance, I'm not giving up my space, I'm not coming back here at 1 o'clock to try and get a space, because fine well, you're going to struggle. It's an absolute nightmare. So yeah, obviously, like Hayley says, you'll have to either pay and display on the day, or you can get permit which permits you to park on campus for the full academic year. But again, with any other parking permit, you're not guaranteed a space, which I feel like annoys you even more, because you're like, I'm paying all this money to park here and I can't even get parked. And like Hayley says, the uni's surrounded by Bridge of Allen and Causeway Head, and it's quite small, and there's no massive multi-storey car parks lying around that you can just go and park in. If you have to park off of campus, you're looking at a solid 20-minute walk to try and get back. So just be aware of that if you are driving. It's definitely a nightmare, and it might be one of those things that you have to learn the hard way. So if you've got a lecture at 9, I would say definitely turn up at like 8 and just try and guarantee yourself that spot and go and grab a coffee or go and sit in the library for half an hour or whatever it may be. But yeah, that's 12 points that we feel are really important for a law fresher to know. And I feel like we have hit a lot of important points. What do you think, Hayley? Do you think if you'd known these 12 things when you were in first year, would that have made a big difference to you?
I think it would have definitely the parking, of course. Also the book situation, because I think it is just a panic when you go into first year that, you need to buy everything, you need to do everything that it says basically on your module. And obviously if you're just a first year, you don't know any different, but that definitely would have made a big difference to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think the book thing's a big one. I definitely would have saved a lot of money if I maybe curbed my enthusiasm a little bit and didn't get sucked into the first year LLB life and start buying textbooks left, right and centre. And it's not even just the core textbooks. If you really start getting into it, you end up buying the little essentials books, and they can be £15-20 here or there. And before you know it, you've got a bill for £200 just for textbooks, and that doesn't even include your parking permit or food or anything like that. So I would definitely just keep an eye on it, and just, these 12 things really will help you. So there's a lot of good information in here, and I really do hope that this will be beneficial I think a lot of them are probably beneficial, not even just for first years, but for anyone who is perhaps driving to university for the first time, because obviously if you were in first year last year, you wouldn't have been on campus. So if you happen to be a second year listening to this, definitely keep an eye out for the parking situation, because that's definitely a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Hayley, for coming back on. It's been great to chat to you again. It's great to have you back on the podcast. You're always a well-liked guest around these parts, so thank you so much for coming back on, and I really look forward to the Oscola and essay writing class on Thursday. I know for myself personally, it's going to be very beneficial, so I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, thanks very much, Hayley. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jedd. It's been great to come back on and chat to you again.
Thank you for listening to the Stirling University Law Society podcast. Be sure to check out our website and social media pages through the links below.